Oops, sorry. I always do that. Let's take a look at the second week of our first unit, founding documents. You are going to compare some perspectives on the role of state and national governments. Immediately, once the Constitution was created, it wasn't perfect. There were still lots of things in it that are going to be addressed over the last 200 and some odd years that it has been in existence. However, the U.S. Constitution's strength is second to none, and the reason it has lasted so long is because we do have the ability to change it as our needs and our desires and circumstances change. The Constitution can be changed also, but it cannot be changed easily. So it's got to have a tremendous amount of support among all people to make the change, which is, again, what gives it its strength. So immediately after the Constitution, we get what are called reform movements. These are groups of people who feel like there's something that needs to be addressed in the Constitution that's not. For example, men could vote, but women could not. African Americans were enslaved, and they certainly could not vote, either men or women. And slavery is an issue, and that's going to be an issue that's going to be changed in our Constitution too. And it's going to be bitterly fought over, really, for the next 150 years. Even after the Civil War, there were quite a number of injustices that were in the Constitution that were not addressed by the state and national law. So you're going to do a little bit of reading on different reform movements. For this assignment, you're going to do what's called a Venn diagram, which is just a graphic that allows you to compare and contrast. And you're going to choose two of those reform movements that we look at here to compare and contrast. And you'll have either one or the other of these assignments. You will not have both. So then we're going to turn around and we're going to look at discriminatory practices. Again, things where we have overlooked a group of people, particularly in terms of voting. So you think, okay, it says all men are created equal in the Constitution, but that was literally interpreted as men, not women. So women could not vote until 1919 in this country. African Americans technically get the right, male African Americans technically get the right to vote in 1870. However, almost immediately after that right is given, many states made laws that made it almost impossible for an African American male to vote. These are going to be called Jim Crow laws, and we're going to look at these. But these are things like, all right, in order to vote, particularly in the South, you had to have owned land prior to the Civil War. Well, no African American, or very few, owned land prior to the Civil War. So that meant they couldn't vote. Even though technically they had the right, the states put in all these laws to keep them from voting. So we're going to look at that voter suppression. And you're going to do a social media post where you are pretending to be someone who does not have the right to vote. And I've given you a lot of things to choose from. You could be a female before 1919. You could be an African American before 1870. Or you could be an African American female in the years 1930 and 1940, because again, those Jim Crow laws were put in place to try to stop them from voting. So if you want to do a little extra research, you can, but you're writing from the viewpoint of that person who has been denied the right to vote. But you've got to use facts in your post. It can't just be all your opinion. All right, then we're going to look at some proud moments in the constitutional ideas, times when the United States really lived up to those ideas of equality and justice and freedom that are written into ideas. And then we're going to look at some not so proud moments, some times when things have fallen through the cracks and have not been addressed where we think they should be. We're going to take a look at freedom of speech. You would think, well, that's not very controversial. That's probably the most controversial interpretation of the Constitution today. For example, you're walking down a sidewalk and someone is spouting beliefs that you don't believe in, and you find them offensive. Maybe they're standing on a street corner and they're talking about, things that you just don't believe in. So where does that person's right to free speech stop and your right to not be insulted start? It's really a very, very sticky, difficult question. So we're going to take a look at, what are the controversies about freedom of speech? And then for your assignment, for your major assessment for this unit, you're going to do an injustices newspaper. Now, you're going to do an article article on a newspaper, like at the front of a newspaper page. If you haven't ever looked at a newspaper, Google it. Front page newspaper, and see like headlines on it. What does it look like? And you're going to talk about one of the injustices, whichever one you choose. Again, you're going to use facts, and you're going to explain what the conflict is. It's got specific directions to it. I'm going to go ahead and click on this one. What should it have? It should have a catchy headline. You should have an image that represents the conflict. What are the details in it? What groups are for it? What groups are against it? What groups support it? Like slavery, not everybody wanted to get rid of slavery, and not everybody wanted women to have the right to vote. So you got to present both sides, because that's what a newspaper does. Explain what has happened with it or to it. Is it still an ongoing conflict, or was it resolved? And then name some key people or groups involved. And certainly, if you're doing the right to vote, you might go all the way up to the 1960s and Martin Luther King and say he did a lot to bring about attention to this particular problem, and a lot of help towards making laws more fair for that particular group of people. So remember, this is not a report, but it's an article written to attract a reader's attention. You want somebody to read your headline and think, oh, I want to read about that. So make sure you're not copying and pasting anything from the internet. This does count as a test grade, so do your best work. You have all of the class period today, and then Monday is a holiday. Your stuff remains open if you want to work in it. That's fine. And then the Tuesday after the holiday, you also have that class period to work on your newspaper as well. Because it's a major test grade, I wanted to give you time to get that completed, and you want to submit it on Tuesday, which is, let me look at my calendar, the 3rd. And this is what it looks like. Okay, so this will be open for you, but it tells you Monday's a holiday. 9/3 is the day to complete, if you haven't already completed your newspaper assignment, and submit it. Have a great week and a great holiday.